For you, it won't be much of. Okay.
Hello. Table.
So we do have a team that is just.
I'm Anna.
This is the only thing one I don't know.
Please have a seat.
I'm a student.
Hey Jason, how do we turn it on? We're pushing the button, but nothing's happening. The camera. Yes. I don't know how to turn. I'm pushing the button and nothing's happening. Unplug the HDMI. Got it. Okay, hold on.
No, it's very hard. I don't recommend it. I didn't have a job.
Okay, I unplugged it and plugged it back in, but nothing's happening. Where? Left side, there's a switch. On, off. Okay, so Tuheen just pushing it in. Is it on the camera itself? I can't see it. Okay, I don't see the on off anyway. Oh, on. It just says stop start, but nothing's going on. So, there's a lever. What does it look like? On the left-hand side. Yeah, I see it. Okay, it just went on. Okay, the camera at least, the light went on. Okay. It says no signal. Hold on. Oh God. Okay. Okay, I see the camera's on. That's good. Okay. Okay. Now, of course, I've messed up your beautiful thing. Okay. So Okay. So, you want to gotta have a clap or what? Like yeah, lower the angle when they start talking. All right, yeah. Hello, welcome. Yeah, welcome. Thank you all for coming. And let's see, we wanted to start at 7:02, so we're a little bit late. But welcome. My name is Kathy Coco, and I am the briefing manager here at the Client Center. So welcome. We're delighted to have the community here tonight, and I think we're slated here for 7 to 9 p.m. We've got a distinguished panel for discussion. So I just wanted a couple of housekeeping things. As you know, there's snacks and drinks that'll be there for when we're over. If anyone needs to go to the restroom, it's straight down the hallway and around to the side, and then come back. There's some signs when you come back. And if an emergency happens, the fire door is just right in the back. So I don't expect anything to happen today. And I did ask for facilities to cool down, so hopefully the AC will kick in a little bit. And I just wanted to thank you all for coming, and I'm going to introduce a first special guest here, who's also a co-host of mine, is Glenn Cornell. So Glenn?
Yep.
Hi.
Howdy everybody, I'm the head of the Power AI Austin Meetup Group, and for those who signed up via that avenue versus Tuhin's group, thank you very much. I just want one little housekeeping thing. The name of the group will be changing later this year, thanks to some wonderful changes we have in the product line, but no worries, the group will still continue to exist, and we look forward to having you guys out for future meetings.
And then Tuhin, I think you all know, the wonderful host. It's great.
All right, thank you, Kathy, for the introduction. So, yeah, hi, my name is Tuhin Mahmood. I'm the organizer for the Austin Big Data AI Meetup and also co-organizer for the IBM Power AI Meetup group. So thanks for coming. Let's get started. We have a really handful of things we'll be doing, and it will be really exciting. So, and also, Duke, if you want to ask a question or anything, just raise your hand. We'll try to accommodate everyone into the whole panel discussion. So,
Yep. Oh, here, let me get that. Do you have the clicker?
yeah. Okay, so yeah, so great. So we have our panelists here, and we are getting started. As we discussed, this is the meetup group we have. We have a couple of announcements for our meetup, which is we have in the Capital Factory upcoming May 23rd, July 25th. Invited speaker Professor Philip and principal research scientist from NVIDIA. Those two. So keep posted on that and do sign up, and hopefully we'll see you there as well. And today's meetup, obviously, IBM is sponsoring it, food and venue, everything. So big hand of clap for them. And as a first try, we do have a YouTube live streaming. I don't know how it will work out, but that's also in the game. We have a Slack channel for this meetup as well. So we have things going for us. So now down to the actual panelists. We have our special guest, invited guest here. Thanks for all of you coming here and giving us a valuable time. So hopefully we'll be able to make good use of your time and enjoy and make it interesting. So for our first, it's not no any order, just whatever came up. So our first special guest is Lalitha Krishnamoorthy. She is the Director of Analytic Platform Engineering at IBM, and she has been in IBM from 2001, and she's also very strong with young women career development in STEM area. So locally, she works in that area, as well as our big group, Data Platform, Data Science. I'll let her speak to that a little bit. Lalitha, thanks for coming. Our next guest is Oliphant, and he is also a big supporter of our meetup group. came to our meetup group last year and gave an excellent speech, and thanks for coming again. And he's the founder of the Quansight. He's the new endeavor he's doing. He's also known for Anacoda and focused by the usage of Islam and other things. So, and he's also doing customer-facing relationship and a lot of cool things in Austin area. So thanks for coming. Our next panelist is Vijay Sankaran. Is the managing director of our AI or State Street Corporation, and it's also a kind of adjacent to us here. She is locally Austin-based. He was also previously in IBM and did global head of advanced analytics. He's been an Austinite for the last 14 years, and he's been doing a lot of cool stuff as well, starting many companies or leading them as he's making his mark in the Austin area. So thanks for coming, Vijay. And next we have Karl Weinmeister. Sorry about that. Yeah, and he's the manager cloud AI developer advocacy at Google. So we have a lot of cool things happening in Google's or from TensorFlow and everything. So he might add to that. And he is leading a global team of data science engineering experts who engage with users. And he was previously the director of engineering at Spark Cognition. And he's also an Austinite from UT Austin, Longhorn. And he enjoys running, trying to relearn piano. You might want to hear about a little bit about what's he doing about that. But yeah, so we have all set up, so we'll get started very soon. And thank you all for coming and making it a successful panel discussion. So I'll basically, this is the format I'm trying to use, but make it free format if you want. We have a number of topics that we selected from all the questions we received and glance through. And so we have AI trends, skills, software stack, AI for social good, AI research, and AI future. A lot of topics, a lot of things to cover. We don't have to cover everything if we can get to it, but that's what our target is. So with that in mind, we'll set the stage for the first topic, which is the AI trend. And we have, I have some, this is what I would like to ask a question. Basically, IBM CEO, Jeannie, in her opening address in CES this year, discussed the IBM term, the broad AI, which will unify learning and reasoning. This is a very bold statement. So we're trying to see what you see in your immediate work environment in terms of where the AI trend is going, and also, yeah. So that would be the leading question. Maybe we can start.
Do you want to start with that?
Yeah. We got it here.
I don't know. It's your public.
Absolutely. So I think, more and more, I think we're seeing clients tell us that, can you guys hear me okay? Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So I think we're hearing more and more clients really telling us that this is not really artificial intelligence. It's augmented intelligence. That's the way I see it as well. It's really about augmenting intelligence in a way that is meaningful. And when I look at industry trends and we look at, whether it is industry or skills or job market, I think it's clear that there is a lot of interest in overall in AI and in data science, in machine learning, and as you go deeper and deeper into neural networks as well, right? So from an industry trend perspective, I want to give you an example that I saw in a recent Stanford AI Index report that they published for the very first time last year. It was published in 2018, and it's the first ever attempt made by somebody to actually level set on what exactly and how we measure progress. Because everybody claims we are AI, we're doing something in AI. So this was the first attempt at publishing an official report that's out there, and you can Google and find it. It basically tells you what the progress is, what the actual industry trends are regarding, skills, jobs, whatever it is. So, and a key data point, just to give you a perspective that I took from reading that report, was how many of you have actually heard of the NIPS conference? Okay, so at least 4. But the point is, it's actually Neural Information Processing Systems Conference. It's a pretty boring conference from back in the 1980s, not anymore. So this was a conference where back in the 1980s, and when I was in grad school, my dean basically said, you gotta go to this thing, okay? And it was like almost a forced thing. It wasn't very grand or very popular. And there were about, less than 80 people. And this was back in, late 90s, 2000-ish. And last year, just for the record, it was sold out under 12 minutes with over 3,000 people that registered for this conference. So that's a data point for you to kind of put in perspective. A boring conference in 80s becomes like sold out on Twitter. They close down registrations in under 12 minutes. The point that I'm trying to make is this trend is not just about us talking about it. I think it's really happening. And there's definitely a lot of interest when we take that data and put it and think about why are they interested in neural networks and what are they solving for? You actually get that perspective of what they are in that business. So.
I think it's funny you mentioned that. I think the biggest movement is actually just awareness. Like, there's nothing really new about what's happening. The new thing is that compute is faster, and the amount of data people are applying is a lot bigger. But the techniques they're applying have been worked on for decades. We used to call it inverse problems. There's a lot of techniques, and the interest of the world was actually tiny. I feel like my whole career I've been spending trying to get people at Microsoft and IBM excited about this stuff. And they've been kind of like, yeah, nice, the lab coats. So to me, the big trend has been all of a sudden the business professionals, rather than being caught up in the next Java bean craze, right, there's something to this advanced analytics that we're looking at. Great, so the attention's there. Now that creates some challenges too, because some of the same techniques that were used to apply that got us, infrastructure for the web or, databases, the SQL movement is not going to work here. And so the only concern I have is in this. So Ginny, I have a lot of respect for her, but I worry about statements like that. When she comes in and says, okay, AI is going to be about learning and reasoning. So we are a long way from reasoning with AI systems, right? A long way. Like maybe it might not happen in 20, even 50 years. Maybe it'll happen eventually, but it'll happen a long time from now. But we're really close, and we have a lot of good applications for learning. And so maybe if we combine broad AI as connecting machines and humans, the humans doing the reasoning, and the machines doing the quick stuff, the automatic learning, the things that are very fast for machines to do, then I can get behind that in a really big way. But we need to be careful that people don't, the executive who's signing budget checks doesn't assume that this means, oh great, I'm gonna be able to fire 100 people and replace it with a machine tomorrow. But if they think, oh, I'm gonna be able to up-level my 100 people and maybe have 200 new jobs actually because I'm doing more for people, because I'm letting machines do the parts they do well, that's exciting.
Great. Yeah, so I think that everything you guys said is spot on, that there's a lot of hype in artificial intelligence, and it's interesting, a lot of the folks on my team are starting to just steer away from the term artificial intelligence and use machine learning a little bit more, just because it's a little bit more representative of what people are doing. We're basically making predictions with large amounts of data. And a trend that I'm seeing quite a bit is that I think the tools are now out there for, they talk about democratizing AI. It's really starting to happen where you have, starting with APIs that have been out, several years ago, and then now you have automated neural network architecture search. You have capabilities like that that are allowing developers, data analysts, data engineers that maybe haven't studied data science for quite some time, they're able to have pretty accurate models with some of these tools that are out there now. So it's great to see data science kind of becoming more accessible to everybody. That's what I'm seeing so far.
Thank you. So, one of the counterpoints I'd like to make is, when we focus too much on the hype about, the interest in the space, what we lose track of is the fact that AI itself, the term now that we call it, is a trend, right? It's just part of a long-running continuum. Started off, I would posit that it started off with search, right? It started off with search, and search amassed large amounts of data, and suddenly, Google unleashed big data through the whole infrastructure stack, right? And then when people started digging around in big data, they discovered analytics, advanced analytics. So they brought all those big algorithms into the thing, and eventually some of those algorithms, it started fragmenting into, you're using neural networks, don't call it machine learning and so on. So super specialization is starting to happen. And now people are trying to, say, I'm a data scientist, I'm a machine learning engineer, and so on, right? So all this is part of the whole thing is a trend, right? And you may ask, okay, where is all this stuff going to go? There's advances in every one of these little niches, and some of them will shine. There'll be new languages. TensorFlow is almost becoming a thing of the past, I hear. I mean, they're still working hard on that. But yeah, these things will basically be continuing, right? The most important thing for us, I think I'm representing a company here, or I'm part of a company here, which is a customer for AI. We are a customer of tools and essentially all the algorithms and hardware systems. So we are applying AI for business purposes, right? And what we see happening from the financial industry is it's kind of definitely, of course, the hype is always driving a lot of buzz and interest, but the early successes at 3 areas that we focus on. One is we focus on anything that can deliver operational productivity improvement, operational improvements, so savings, right? The second area that we focus on is anything that can help us manage the risk, because that's pretty much 50% of finance, right? And the third, we try and figure out whether we can improve our customer experience through these processes. In the future, beyond that, we would like to figure out how to make money, by innovating using AI. But that's almost all financial firms that I deal with are all focused on the top 3 ones that I mentioned earlier. And that is sort of as an industry, the financial industry tends to be like the lighthouse or the leading edge of these kinds of applications. And so some of our companies are actually leading the way in solving these kinds of problems, and hopefully the trend will continue.
Okay, that gives me a great leeway to my next question. Basically, you guys all talked about hype. Also IBM and Genie talked about augmented intelligence instead of the broad AI. So we're at footing with practical versus the broader sense of the strategic direction. So how do you differentiate hype from the real value that the business are seeing? And as for McKinsey study recently, it's showing, instead of tech industry picking up the investing, most of the traditional industry are now starting to invest. So I think that's where I want to just see a little bit add to that your thoughts. Maybe you're already touched it.
Okay, so since I was already almost on that topic, let me sort of right. So is it hype is the question, right? And why? What are we doing to make sure that there is some reality peppered in between all that, right? The way I did our solution development, I use a very simple paradigm. I come from manufacturing world, right? What you cannot control what you cannot measure. That's the basic paradigm, right? If you want to improve something, you'll have to figure out how to control it, what are the levers and, knobs and wheels that you have to turn. And you got to have a decent measurement paradigm, right? So first off, pick business processes that have clear understanding of what they are doing. Don't get into any kind of use case that's like, oh, I have a hypothesis, right? So get into some clear definition of your business problem you're trying to solve. It's not a technical problem, first off, right? Then the second thing that you end up having to do is figure out, where is my data that supports all of that supports the business process today. And by applying AI, is it fundamentally going to change something in the business process? Or is it just supporting the act of doing that process better? When you think of productivity improvement, it's just a lot of the latter, right? We're just augmenting the existing people who are working on this. So those are the low-hanging fruit. We go after that and we focus on things like, labor savings, capacity creation through faster processing of stuff. So, we close billions of dollars of transactions across multiple exchanges every day. But it takes us the end of day to calculate all of that. What if I can use some of these techniques to close intraday, every hour, and so on? So I can actually calculate net asset values for mutual funds every hour. And so it starts moving the mileposts for the entire financial industry in a direction which people have to still figure out what can we do now with the additional capacity we have to knowing clearly where the market is moving today or now. Things like that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic to have you on the panel as a customer that's using AI every day. I guess I'd add to that, like you said, it all starts with a business problem. You have to have that, you have to know what you're measuring. You have to have lots of data. You have to have data that's available, that's high quality, that has enough dimensions to be useful. And I think of course, you need to be solving a problem that machine learning is well suited for. Is it classification? You're bucketing things? Are you predicting a value? And I think, like in this slide, all of those industries, there's some interesting use case that AI is helping to make the business better. In the last conference that I mentioned, the interest like Spark Cognition, I thought it was a fantastic use case where I was working with malware detection. So this is a case of viruses are always changing. Traditional techniques kind of memorize a signature within files to detect if it's malware or not. Problem with that is malware is changing all the time. 0-day vulnerabilities are when malware comes on the market for the first time. And so AI is fantastic at finding trends that aren't memorized, but looking at patterns in the data in a way that humans wouldn't be able to. So that's just an example of basically a process where normally researchers would have to find out about the virus, catalog it, announce it to the world. But if you have a machine learning based approach, you'll be able to detect all kinds of threats prior to them being made available. So like I said, again, it's having a clear problem you're trying to solve, having the data available. Often that's quite a challenge, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later. Getting high quality data, being able to work with it, get in the right shape, all that. That's, as people talk about, 80% of data science is getting the data in the right format so that you can use it effectively.
Yeah, this is a great. It's on. Turn on. It's on. Great topic. How to separate hype from reality. It's important because there's two parts of it. Right? One is there's a lot of reality. Right? We don't want to lose the reality in the hype. That's what I get most worried about, is I don't want to overhype it because I know there's a lot of reality there. And I don't want people expecting too much too soon so that they stop the funding of the reality that's there. There's a lot of stuff that you can really do. There has been for many, many years. And I've watched the winters of funding not happen, where people are like, why aren't you investing in this? This is where your biggest problem can be solved, but the investment dollars don't show up because the hype isn't there. So it's kind of like, it's a game we're playing with each other because, humans, we're sheep-like and hype is important to get to move things. So let's appreciate it, but let's use it to solve real problems, focusing on what's real. I think there's a similar possibility here that happened in the internet boom and bust in 2001. Right? It was overhyped then, but at the same time, there were companies like Amazon that were small then, right? And they were executing on the reality of what was there in the internet. And eventually, it became a massive company not because they changed suddenly, because they kept doing what people were trying to quickly get to in the hype. So I think if the promise is, if it feels like it's too good to be true, it's too soon, like, oh, we're gonna have this suddenly, then it's probably on the hype side. But it was like, hey, you know what? We really do have the ability to make, I call them these black boxes. If you can define a problem where you have inputs and outputs clearly defined, and you just don't know how to model, like now we have pretty good non-linear, non-parametric models that can be applied in so many circumstances to go from sound to meaning, right? Just if you can imagine a function that will help your business process, you can probably, and you have enough data to support training a model that produces that function, you can do it. That's pretty exciting. So that's, and the technology is available to iterate on that. I think you've got to have a situation where you can iterate, knowing that the first thing you produce isn't gonna be the answer. Like it's not, hey, I'm gonna throw this over the wall, they're gonna work on it, and magically my business is gonna improve. You've got to, so a lot of it is figuring out the right process to iterate quickly. One of the things, I was kind of outspoken about Hadoop and the craziness around Hadoop in the past. One of the things I'm really appreciative of the Hadoop movement is it started to break down the process walls between organizations. A lot of organizations still struggle with their data management. People are, there's stories of somebody, if you really wanted this data set, you had to go get a chocolate bar to that person on that floor because they really control access to that data. I mean, how are we supposed to get anything if you can't actually iterate quickly and get data from one place to another? And so we can talk more details about the problems of the data lake concept and that everything's going to be in Java craziness that kind of existed for a little while. But the reality of breaking down human processes that were preventing data from talking, people from getting access to it when they needed to. I think the problem right now we're going to face is the very real security concerns that led to those processes. They still exist, right? Those silos were created because of very real compliance and security concerns. And every industry has their various 4-letter or 5-letter acronyms that describe some of those compliance issues. That's going to be where some creative opportunities exist. Like how can we provide those same security guarantees without limiting the availability of data? But again, I think technology can help. It can help with simulating, hey, I don't have anonymized data. So kind of touching a lot of topics there. But it's an important one to me because I think we need to separate the hype from reality so the reality continues to grow. And there are opportunities there. Who's going to be the Amazon equivalent in the internet bust? When the AI hype kind of rounds around, but who's out there actually making AI a meaningful effort and helping businesses succeed because they figured out a way to connect that dots? Maybe it's just going to be Google, I don't know. Or IBM. I think all of the fact that IBM, Microsoft, and Google are all pushing on the same energy gives me a lot of hope that we're going to actually have, it's not going to be one and done, there's going to be a lot of really good movement that happens over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Awesome, I agree with all of you. And I'm going to take a slightly different approach to answering this. I think, how many of you have done your 401k, redistribution or whatever they call it? And I remember 5 years ago, I would go in and look at each one of them and then decide, well, what's the percentage breakdown? But think about, when we talk about hype versus reality, how many of us actually use these financial engines to make decisions on how you rebalance your retirement portfolio? I mean, gone are the days when you would download it or export it into an Excel and sit down and go through it row by row and then decide what you're going to do with it. There is predictive analytics to help you, advanced analytics driven by AI models, which are in place by big financial institutions like Fidelity, etc. I don't know what you guys use for yours, but IBM uses Fidelity. And they actually support you in making decisions. This is exactly why I said this is not about AI, this is about augmented intelligence. Hell no, I'm not going to let an engine decide how to rebalance my 401k and just say, go do it. I'm obviously going to review it, right? I have an opinion there, and then make it happen. But the point that I'm trying to make is that it's not all hype. This is real life that we're dealing with right now. Same thing with, when you make your medical benefits. This year, I have to tell you, it was a piece of cake for me. It exactly told me, this is how many times you took your kids to the doctor, this is how many visits you had, this is how many prescription antibiotics you have to fill for the kids. And it was so easy for me to make a decision on what I need to do with my, how you choose your benefits. The point that I'm trying to make is that, yes, there is hype around AI. I get about 1,000 resumes, exaggerated, but everything has data science in it, like it used to have Java 5 years ago, okay? So I have to really understand, okay, when you put data science, what exactly does that mean? Because everybody's a data scientist today. I mean, it's just the way. And when you dig deeper, they say, well, I work on data. I know how to run SPSS statistics, or I've done some, some kind of Excel analytics or analysis, and, so I can work with data. But, so what I'm trying to get across is that there are actual real life examples that we use every day, where you actually see AI in action, whether you realize it or not, that's a different thing. So it's not all the hype from my perspective, the way I look at it. Is there a gap? Absolutely. So just a quick example, right, a story. So, my husband and I were arguing about, how much time, like when you put your GPS on, you tell you where you want to go, it says you're going to be there in 20 minutes. But the argument is, it should be based on my driving ability, my capability. Like he says, you don't run a single yellow light, you always drive on the slow lane. So obviously that doesn't mean anything. You're going to get here in 20 minutes because you're not going to be here in 20 minutes. So the point is, again, there is a gap there where AI can be made better, right? I mean, there can be artificial intelligence that's personalized to me, which says Lalita's driving habit is usually going to get there in 45 minutes. So, but the thing I'm saying is there are actual real-life examples where this exists. There is hype where, where people promote it more than actually solve, because there are unsolved problems, like I said, that still exist, that we still face in everyday life. And then there is another level of IBM research and work that we're doing, where there are clients that are coming to us and saying, for example, here's another example, a real-life one, where it's outside of some of the things that we engage with. So, when there is all these movie makers that make these movies, and they're trying to figure out what portions of the movie do I include in the trailer so that it's successful, so that they can have a higher conversion. How do I market this smartly with intelligence so that I can actually sell more, right? Which is any business's need. So we actually had Watson go in and watch it, and then based on reaction from a small set of people in the preview or whatever they do before they launch the movie, based on facial recognition and the voice recognition that they had, it sensed the sentiment analysis and was able to pull together a trailer, which the movie companies, and these are some big guys, that actually said they pay these people lots of money, and it's got creative people or whatever their job role is, but they're supposed to be coming in and figuring out what pieces of a movie they would pull and make that trailer. That again exists today, so it's not all hype. So my opinion.
So before we go too much deep into our topic, one question I would like to ask each of you: what is keeping you excited in working now? It doesn't have to be AI, whatever is making you work exciting right now.
Oh, what's making us excited right now? Oh, man. So it's actually the potential of humanity. Like, I'm excited by the growth of open source ecosystems. I'm excited by the ability that's showing to create infrastructure where there's a lot of stake, other people have stake. I'm excited about the potential of fixing some of the issues that arise around that. I'm excited by the fact that something that I used to geek out with a few professors around, machine learning topics, I couldn't get anybody to think about, camera outbound and matrix multiplies, and they're looking at matrix multiplication. Now we don't need all that, right? That's the starting point. Now people are excited about that. So I've got all kinds of people pretending to care about, in some cases, about some of those deep things. I get excited about that. And then I get excited about the business, the fact that it's opening the doors for it's removing silos. So, because a lot of times people have siloed themselves into, oh, you're in healthcare, or oh, you're a math nerd, and I'm a business person, we can't talk. That's never been true, but now all of a sudden there's a reason to have a common language, and to then break down those silos that show up, so that we can have a conversation to improve the life of people. I get excited about all that.
So I'm just excited I get to do this every day, working with data science. When I was back in university, this was a bit before, sort of, as Travis talked about, the growth of big data, compute power that's made the real explosion over the last few years possible. But I was working on an independent study project for solving crossword puzzles. Basically get your hints, and then we'd come up with answers. And this is kind of what we call an expert system, where we'd come up with modules for history questions or pop culture using IMDb, and pulling in all these different sources, creating a probabilistic model. This project ended up being worked with the New York Times crossword puzzle editor, was looking at what we were doing. This is kind of the beginning of computers being able to do things we didn't think was possible. So that was my favorite project that I worked harder than anything on, trying to kind of make it more accurate, and all that. And then kind of my career I kind of went more on the engineering side for a while, and then being able to come back to something like this has just been fantastic. And in my current role, basically, I work with partners, customers, people that want to learn about AI, and get to talk about it, get to learn from their experiences, and then bring that back into Google to help our products serve our users better, and provide input on the friction that our users are having. Anyway, just such an exciting space to be in, and again, feel grateful that I get to be part of it.
Okay, so how many of you guys are actually software programmers or have written code in this room? Almost all of you, right? So we all have experienced the rush of actually, you write a piece of code, and within 5 minutes or so, when you see some result, and you get that instant dopamine fix, right? Wow, right? That's software for you, right? And AI is just, again, part of that whole continuum. But at the same time, that excitement factor of quickly doing something and showing yourself, first convincing yourself that, hey, you're capable of doing something nice, is part of the puzzle, right? The other part of the puzzle is, again, how many of you guys own an Alexa, Amazon device, or Google device? Okay, one third. Right. So there's a lot of room for conversion. You guys have really savvy, right? So the reason I'm asking you that question is the rest of the general public, because most of you are software engineers, right? So the rest of the general public tends to perceive these devices as the epitome of AI, right? All that it is doing, people don't realize it's doing speech to text, sending some information up into a cloud, and then the intelligence is not in that device. The intelligence is elsewhere, right? So we are still only at the tip of the iceberg in terms of what is potentially possible because of these massive explosion of all these devices at the edge, as I call it, right? So AI at the edge is what I'm going to be very excited about when it happens, because there's lots of devices that are going to be equipped with the next gen chips that can do neural computing on the edge. There'll be lots of other fun applications that we have not yet scratched the surface of, and that's what keeps me going.
I think what keeps me, going is about 20 years into the career is really, I think, impact and reach. When I think about it, I think the impact that we have from a technology perspective as engineers, growing from, where we started as basic developers to being able to have the kind of impact on our clients, on solving real life business problems using technology, using advanced analytics, whether it is ML or DL, right? And actually seeing that it makes a difference in how our clients are, whether it's about increasing their revenue, solving problems that they've been struggling with for a while. I think that impact, that innovation that we bring from a technology perspective, and that impact that we see happening, not just with our clients, but also for social cause, like Call for Code, some of the programs that we do. I think being able to say I'm part of that journey with the team, I think it really makes me feel, extremely like I have to keep going. The reach part is really about my personal passion about seeing more and more women in STEM and encouraging more and more women to be as part of this journey and join in and being a role model for them, to support them, to mentor them. And I really feel that the kind of work I do, it really opens that door where they can start feeling like, math isn't boring, science isn't boring, and encouraging these kids in, when they're in high and trying to make these career choices and really being able to be a voice to support them. So since I'm able to accomplish innovation and reach, that's why I said impact and reach, those are the two things that makes me want to keep going as long as I can.
Cool. So learned a lot about each of you. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm really excited everybody's learning Python.
Yeah, good. So now I want to bring it to a topic that might interest many of you in this room. It's more like the AI skills and what you need and the skill gap. So there, according to there are a lot of studies, and it's shown that lack of skilled people is one of the big concerns in this industry. So we had a lot of new fresh graduate coming up, a lot of new university programs started, but still it may not be enough to bridge the gap. And on the same token, there are a lot of existing engineers, scientists, mathematicians who may not be versed in this skill, but still intelligent enough to maybe make good use of. So with that, I would like to leave the question a bit maybe to the panels here. So it says basically World Economic Forum has a study which says about 54% of all employees will require significant reskilling by 2022. It's coming up very soon. And there is an unquestionable need to take personal responsibility for lifelong learning on the individual side. IBM started AI Skill Academy to promote skill development inside employees and encouraging that. UK, I've seen an industrial strategy that says national retraining scheme. They're thinking about it. I don't know more detail, but that's so as business and individual business leaders here, you have three choices. You can hire staff already processing the skills, you can automate the works being done by the people, or you can retrain the employees. So with that, who would be responsible, in your opinion, or what is the strategy you should take to both address the skill gap and also train new upcoming skills?
It's a great question. I think a lot about it, actually. The company I've started now, I've left Anacoda, I'm still involved, but I'm full-time working for a company called Quansight. One of the things we do is address the skills gap. in our small way, right? Obviously, it's bigger than we can provide. We find one model I think needs to, it's kind of retraining, but helping people find their new role. Because it's going to be a combination. It's not that, oh, hey, this group, they're all going to work for me still, and they're going to be different. Like, so I think enablement programs that help people, not just the boot camps that teach you a new topic, but the mentors that have to be involved. Like I do a big intern program, have a lot of interns that work with me. One of the challenges with interns, actually, I love interns. I have 200 of them. The challenge is I can't really manage 200 interns. Right? They can sort of sit in a room and hope they don't kill each other, right, or hurt anybody.
Haven't discovered a new AI.
Right. That may be a good idea, right? Yeah, to kind of give some management feedback. Actually, that's a good idea. But you know, being intentional about that process. So I think there are things. On the flip side, I also see really talented people underutilized. Like the open source world is full of people who are really good, but are completely underutilized. You know, they're not brought in to be mentors. And part of it is we don't have the right business flow, we don't have the right processes. So we're doing things like selling mentoring. It's a two-hour workshop, a 4-hour workshop. We can bring people in and they can sit there with your team and go over problems and go over questions. The answer is not a quick solution. It's not a quick, here's a program, everyone's going to retrain. It's how do we get connections happening so that people with the skills can connect with people that want to learn them and in a business-friendly way that meets quarterly demands for business too. There's a lot of opportunity there for entrepreneurship, a lot of opportunity for people to promote and propose other kinds of business transactions. So the opportunity is really there, but you got to focus on it, and you got to bring to the table new thinking.
So I think that, in general, I think each of us has to take responsibility, given how much more faster, I guess, that things are changing and evolving. I really think that each of us has to have that, the willingness to commit to continuing on an education, never-ending learning journey. Because at the end of the day, it's really about us continuously augmenting ourselves so that we can stay smarter than some of these models that we're building, right? Not that they're going to replace, it's really about, being able to process that kind of data, because even if the model gives you data, right, at the end of the day, you need to be able to derive cognitive insights or meaningful insights from that data as to make a decision, which is what our jobs typically become, is you have to make a decision. You can say, I need data to make a decision, but once the data is given, you do have to have the ability to process that, connect all the different data points, and then figure out what's the right decision I want to make. Am I going to continue with this project or investment or funding or staffing, whatever it is, or am I going to stop that and start something else, right? So my take on learning in general and skill gap is absolutely we need to invest in our people and our teams in order and give them the opportunity to go and rebuild skill sets that have become obsolete so that they are competitive for the future. When you're developing, I take personal responsibility in making sure that my teams, my organization is given the opportunity to go do it. But there was a survey that someone said that when someone was given an online class versus actually sent to a classroom session, it was there was more tendency for people to actually go and finish the classroom session. It's a 3-day boot camp or whatever it is, but it's an online class. They have the time, and I know some people just even within my own team where they've been given the opportunity, and it's like, well, it's 2 months. I still have 3 more months to go before I finish the certification. So the point that I'm making is that I think it's a self-inbuilt discipline, right? And I think it's really on each of us to figure out what that career path and journey is for you. What are the skills you need to be relevant and essential in the future? And I do feel that it's a lot of responsibility that really falls on the individual themselves. And companies and corporations and several things, community can help you with figuring out where can you do this at, and what would be better for you to learn and provide you guidance. But in the end, I feel that each of us, we own our learning destiny.
I think there are some great points there. I guess maybe to build on that, I just look at it like this is a continuing evolution, right, that we've had in technology. Machine learning is a tool. If you look back at how the internet changed things for everybody, and then with mobile, where you started to see people in jobs where they're using an iPad to do things more efficiently, and now this is sort of the next phase of, we talked about being data-driven. This AI really makes that piece of the puzzle of collecting data at every phase. More specifically for people in our field that are looking to break into it, I would say there's lots of entry points into data science. You might say, well, it's hard breaking in as entry level. Well, you could come at it from different paths. You could start maybe as a data analyst or even use Excel, right? It's not that bad. It's kind of starting there, getting some of those fundamental skills of working with the data, or maybe a different path if you're a developer, starting to include some, use some machine learning APIs in what you're doing, taking some boot camps, or DevOps even. I think there's a huge need for ML ops, where we're productionalizing machine learning, where we're kind of seeing how is a model progressing over time, how do we prevent regressions in our model, just like we do with code. There's tons of ways that you can sort of hook in and then start to kind of build your career with intention towards data science, if that's something that you want to do. I'd also say that as a data scientist, really, it requires a lot of skills beyond just the purely technical and quantitative skills. If you think about it, you need to take difficult business problems and then, say, gathering the data itself. The data it's not, maybe like a Kaggle data set where it's all sort of there for you. You're working across different departments, gathering the data, trying to explain why it's needed, pulling it together. As you're building your model, then you need to show the results. You need to be able to present and show, here's how we improved this business process as a result of our work. So you kind of need the presentation skills. There's a lot to it. So kind of, I guess what I'm really getting at here is a career in data science is a journey. There's lots of places to start, and just kind of keep working on that, keep building expertise, and I think the more mid or senior level roles really include a lot of business skills in addition to the technical skills that are the base.
Let this start. All right. So going back to my play on words, right? So basically, along with those edge devices I was talking about last, have you guys come across something called Alexa skills? Only a few. So skills. The spectrum has actually made it into the AI terminology itself, right? It's basically teaching that device to do a task. That could be as simple as turning on a light somewhere, or controlling some other device, or sequencing three or four different sets of actions. And that's considered as a skill. So we've done skills down to that level, guys. All you need is just do three things and you have a skill, right? So extrapolate that. Who are the kinds of people who are jumping in and actually developing the skills? There's about 2,500 companies at last count that are developing skills for Alexa. Guess what the age group is for those guys, right? Early college hires, or early professionals, early career professionals, right? They are the guys that are keen on learning new things, brand new stuff. They're not burdened by fragments of a hurt and injury throughout the mid-career growth and so on, right? So that's one track. So when you look at that, my personal perspective is there's two or three, actually, let's say three kinds of career levels, right? One is the early career path, 0 to say 10, 12 years. And then from that point on, 12 to about like 30 or so odd years is the second track of people, where you have to start reinventing yourself. because you've spent the first 12 years either in a single domain, mastering, knowing everything about that domain, and domain knowledge is very, very important. Never underestimate that, right? So the more you know about a certain area, you need to learn everything there is about it. What is the business process? What is the data that is produced as part of that? Where is the data stored? Who does what with the data? How does the workflow go? All of those things, learn about it in the first few years. But when it comes to starting to, AI is not a solution. What we are talking about as augmented intelligence requires solution development. A model does not do anything. It will never see the light of day if it is not integrated into the overall solution. So there is still room for software engineers to lead these data scientists and to sort of take what they're developing, package it in such a way that it can be consumed easily. There's still huge room for user experience, UI design folks to deal with this stuff. So do not think that you've got to go to the epicenter of this AI movement. You can actually be, there's a whole ecosystem that is going to be needed in order for this to grow. So that would be my take, which is I didn't touch upon the third class of folks, right, which I call as the perpetual ideators, usually professors and teachers at colleges. They have a perpetual career. They're just spawning beautiful, nice ideas, and they're putting out articles and stuff out there. And that's also part of the overall mix of folks. Choose what you want to be. I start.
I'm sorry, let me close everything. I just recognized some of these quotes, I didn't realize. So first, that quote in the upper thing that only 10,000 people worldwide, I think that's BS, first of all. I think that's completely ridiculous. Right, if there's a lot of people, now, are there people in positions where they'll have the kind of impact? Maybe not, right? Because everybody doesn't need to be doing that either. Like, just as you were describing, there's so much more to do. And I would say that today, the same human skills that have been required forever to do well in your career, humility, agility, willingness to learn, kind of emotional intelligence, all those things are still relevant and still critical. In fact, a lot of the data science skills isn't so much as, okay, you need to learn machine learning. Guess what? TensorFlow, scikit-learn, they made it easy, right? It isn't that hard, actually, to use these tools. So it turns out, I think the reskilling is less about, we got to train everybody how to do complex mathematics. Sure, that might help you make better decisions, but it's actually just the same human skills you've always needed to do well in your career is still needed.
With that topic, maybe I would like one or two audience questions if you have any. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to address the panel with, what are your thoughts about ethics in AI?
So the question
Data
is,
science.
okay, so the question is, what is the ethics?
How do you see ethics in AI?
How do you see
What are the
ethics in
important,
AI?
crucial issues that are facing us from an ethics point of view?
The question was, what do we believe, what do we think about AI and ethics? Which is a broad topic, and there are a lot of scenarios. I think it's summarized, there's a lot of ways to summarize it. A machine is still a machine. Garbage in, garbage out. So there is a little fear in me that we'll get so trusting of the device to tell us everything that we won't recognize, well, this is just a model that was trained. Therefore, if I don't understand that model, it may be telling me stuff that's biased. It may be telling me stuff that I just want to hear. One of the phenomenal things, there was a professor in computer science in Chicago that I got the chance to know, and he had a program where he was studying kind of how the internet, as you connect people together, it concentrates ideas. Like all of a sudden, everybody believes the same thing, even if it's wrong. It's like, it doesn't necessarily give us more knowledge, it certainly connects us so we all believe the same thing, but it could be completely wrong. And that's always been a challenge of the human condition, is we cannot know everything, so we've got to have our trusted sources. The problem happens when all those trusted sources, all of a sudden, we think that's God somehow. Right? AI is now the new God, and it actually might be completely wrong. And so I think it's important for us to know the details better. That's what concerns me, is we don't have enough people trained, understand AI is a model, it's based on data. Data was bad, we're gonna get a bad result.
Yeah, some fantastic points there. Regarding the data, I mean, if you think about it, machine learning really is based on the inputs that we have. It reflects our society. And I think one very important concern is that that we're using AI to basically serve all of our users equitably. If we're taking a data set that's missing data that's relevant to certain of our users, or we have data that's reflecting outdated assumptions in our society, the model is going to start reflecting that. So we need to be aware of how our models operate. Kind of, and touching on that is a concept of explainability. You might have heard of it as interpretability. Looking at models as more than as black box, that you're able to open it up and be able to look at how did the neural network decide what it did. It's going to be super critical to do that. Yeah, basically, I think, and finally, I would add, it's important to have a human as part of the loop. I think Lalitha mentioned that about the 401k example, about she wanted to just make sure that she could make the final decision. So making sure everybody is accounted for and treated responsibly, that we're able to understand what's happening behind the scenes, and we can override it. We have to put in feedback into the loop is super important.
Yeah, so it's a real conundrum, because part of what AI is doing is it's subsuming tasks that we consider as simple things for human beings to do, right? So where do we draw the boundary on when, how much quotes unquote reasoning should we develop or build into AI? Right now, like what Travis mentioned very early on, the hype around AI is just data ingestion, learning, basic learning, right? Reasoning is far, far away, but just like I mentioned, if earlier, if 3 skills can be assembled to represent some sort of a complex task, you suddenly start making the system appear as if it's reasoning, okay? And these are the early Lisp solutions, and I'm going back to the 70s, right? The early Lisp solutions used to write stories, right? And people now claim, XYZ system can write a story. That was done long back. So where I'm going at with this is, does this notion of artificial intelligence subsuming some human functionality cause some sort of displacement? Are you lesser for that, right? Is an overarching question. Okay, yeah, people will be displaced. That robots did that in the last stage of automation, right? So AI is just following that trend. But you can say the same thing with computers. Computers automated so many things before even AI existed, and so it made many things obsolete. So that when you look at ethics from the perspective of equitability, right? That's a different ballpark. That's a different game, right? Where the analysis itself is biased because of the data that was provided it to learn. That's a different problem than what I'm interested in solving, which is how do you, in this augmented intelligence world, how do you ensure that the human who's interacting with that AI is still, benefiting and actually improving? It's not just the machine that is being transferred all the knowledge into, right? So that's part of the question. I don't that I grapple with quite a bit.
Go to your comment and then give you the last word. I don't want I break the pattern. I want to be able to do that. So just 2 thoughts occurred to me about AI and ethics. It's when a human's in the loop, it gives us an accountability. The problem is when an AI is the only one there, and it's a problem we have to grapple with. Okay, now who do we blame? Who's accountable? And what does accountability mean in our society, right? Because we kind of are comfortable at least somewhat. If we dig too deep, we recognize, oh yeah, what's it mean for justice? Someone did something wrong, put them in jail, is that really the point? Do we want to punish them? Do we want to fix them? What's the issue? I think that it really will make us grapple with our own humanity if we, and that would be a good thing for us if we really do that. But for a long time, we're going to have to keep a human in the loop for the accountability. Because I don't think as a society we're ready to turn over, oh yeah, the AI made me do it. Or, so the AI did it and nobody's responsible.
Except for in the case of credit reports.
True. Yeah, true. That's also true. You're right. We've done that. We replaced that. It is funny. We have already. There's a lot of. I've talked with a lot of financial firms actually about. We want to make loans better, predict loans better. Well, it turns out the best way to make a loan is the best predictor is zip code, right? If the data will show you that. Right? So we already have laws in place. You can't do that, right? So we already have some guards in place to sort of. We recognize we need to make things more equitable than just the raw data would allow. So it's going to be an opportunity to discover that. And I have a book idea. My daughter's a writer. I really want to write this book set in the future at a time when the Supreme Court of our country, I can imagine like the judges start becoming AIs, right? But right. But you can imagine people go, oh, the rules, we got flaws, a bunch of complex rules. We just want to figure out who did break it or not. It's a bunch of AIs. And it's a time when it's always been governed by 5 humans and 4 machines. And the time in the future when the 5th machine, ultimately the machines have the majority. Anyway, you can sort of see that emerging. But I think it's going to be a long time, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're probably got to have women in there.
That's the next company, Travis. So, I was reading a report, actually, that's a really excellent question, and it's something that I think definitely keeps me up at night. There was a report I was reading where it said that researchers in UK, this is a real life story, they built a AI model, the insurance company, and they wanted to see, how they can do better predictive, like your premiums and things like that. And this report said that based on the model that they had launched, and it was in beta, thankfully, it said that all things equal, they found that the rate for your premium for women same age was actually lower than for men same age, everything, driving record, everything same. This was the model that they actually built. Some of you are nodding, so you've obviously seen this data. But it was amazing to me, and it made me think, just because women have fewer accidents, just one parameter that somebody's programmed somewhere in that model, it's actually making a decision that she's a safer driver versus this male, which is bias, right? I mean, you're basing that on what? So I think that's exactly where you're hitting the thing is, how do you deal with this bias? And I want to tie this back to, the skills and jobs conversation we were just having. This is job opportunity in my head. There's going to be exceedingly a very strong need in the market for data scientists and AI people that can actually run validation checks on these kind of models and call some of them rogue and say, no, this is a biased model versus an unbiased model. So that, again, I see as a skill gap. Are we qualified to even solve a problem like that? No. But is that an opportunity calling in the future, in the very near future? Absolutely. This is one of the reasons why I believe that the self-driving car thing is still kind of in beta. It's like a prolonged alpha, beta, gamma, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, the reason is because, when you hit somebody, you know that, okay, I hit that person and I'm legally accountable. If my machine hit it, then it's like, okay, now what? Unless it's, it's a really bad situation, but for the most part, it's like, okay, now who's responsible? Is your insurance going to pay for it? There was nobody in the car. So I think the point is that we have to take, it's what our CEO addresses as, responsible stewardship, where I think every person involved in the field of AI and creating these models, whether it's that insurance company in UK or somebody else trying to figure out how to and make the 911 system more smarter, because there is a project like that where AI is, infused into the data decision. I think it's really about.
That's okay.
You can still hear me, but yeah, but I think that's the thing. I think it's really about, taking responsibility. Better?
AI needs power to operate. That's the main power system.
Yeah, something went on.
Okay.
But you guys can hear me okay, I think the point.
And there's nobody in that room, I presume, right?
There, I don't think, is there? There's supposed to be better. Oh, it's coming up.
Try again.
Okay, no.
All right, okay. So so that's really my thing is this,
You're on.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah, wait a second.
So that's basically my opinion is that I think from a skills and job market, there's an opportunity for a lot of people to think through what you would do different. How would you validate this? What would be the acceptance criteria before you promote a model from a development environment to a production environment, right? I would ask that, especially if it's touching any of the human, direct interaction scenarios. That's a job for you for the future, right? Because some of you were asking about skills. And the other thing is, I think, it really comes down to who are these people making decisions on behalf of the machine to make bigger decisions? How are you enabling that? And making sure that some of these courses around ethics are really, part of your data science curriculum. Like, I think Travis was saying earlier, some of the soft skills around being human still persist across the board. Those are not gone just because you've now become a data scientist or an AI specialist, right? So those ethics and basic modes of how we interact and what we believe is, unbiased and diverse and inclusive, all of those things still matter.
Great talk. So I wanted to also, so.
There was some questions on the.
Quick one, maybe.
So, Carnegie Mellon had an absolutely groundbreaking driverless car program. Uber came in and gutted it. And a lot of the big companies with nearly infinite budgets, Google, IBM, Microsoft, are gutting university research things because they're giving these professors nearly infinite resources and massive budgets. And what this is creating is a bit of a brain drain in the universities where universities no longer have the talent they used to. In response to this, the companies aren't dumb, they know this. So having friends at Google, I've heard, you guys have internal training programs where some of these amazing professors are now lecturing internally at Google behind, the wall. And I'm sure that IBM, Microsoft, and Apple are doing similar things. How do companies take some responsibility to keep this knowledge? Because, 20, 30 years from now, we will not have the same thing we've had in place for decades, hundreds of years of training people for the next generation if it's behind the walled garden of a company.
So clarification, Uber gutted it.
Yeah.
Sorry, the question was how do we, companies are gutting our universities to grab talent.
Yeah, you can offer a $30 million
Getting a lot of money.
university cannot compete.
And how do we, and then the concern being they kind of then have internal training that effectively are public universities that are kind of paywalled. Right?
Yes.
Or private, or so privatized the information knowledge transfer isn't going to happen the same way it's happened in the past 50 years.
Yeah.
That's accurate? Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I don't have, I'm not in one of the big companies. I get a chance to talk to them though. I do find it.
I think the question was directed at Chris.
I will reinforce, I'll give another episode. I'll reinforce that it's happening in the sense that I talked to UT professors. I love interacting with professors and universities. And he was like lamenting the fact that he couldn't keep his program going because his people were just offered these crazy salaries.
Yeah.
And he was offered too, he didn't go, right? You know, he's still true to the academic mission, but
I hate to pick on Google, but I've got a lot of friends who work there and tell me some stuff, so.
it was Apple,
Yeah.
for him, yeah.
All right, I mean, to be honest, I don't have a fantastic answer for you. I just think, like with a lot of the social questions we talked about before, it has to be partnerships between corporations, nonprofits, governments. I think that I mean, like a lot of careers, you know, there's kind of like petroleum engineering was super hot a couple of years ago. It kind of was pulling a lot of folks out of academia. I think data science is hot right now. There's kind of incentives to join private industry. There's
It wasn't necessarily a new phenomenon, right?
Right, yeah.
Information theory and, you know, weapons research are, you know, like, what happened then? Like, who's the historians here? We know this, and what happened?
And then let's go for State
So
Street.
I can go first, okay. I think, you know, academia, it's always been one of those areas where in the past, I would say the last, you know, 10, 15 years, I used to see a lot more of universities reaching out to us and saying, hey, I'm doing this program in MIS, or I'm launching this new MBA for information systems, or whatever it is. And, you know, we would like you to partner with the industry from a more experienced perspective. It was really about providing those kids, whether they're graduate or doc kids, about, you know, how do you, you know, what does real life look like without an internship, right? What is real world problems? And that gives them ideas for thesis as they finish their PhDs. And that was pretty typical, I would say, last 10 years or so, and that's basically how it would work between industry and corporations and them. In the last few years, it's been a very interesting turn. I have to agree with you. I've seen more and more of them asking if, you know, we would actually welcome them to come and to the labs and participate or speak. And these are professors from some of the most elite areas, from, you know, whether it's databases or data and the field, and wanting to come and actually collaborate with us on some of these projects, research and some of those areas. So again, I mean, there is no, you know, clear answer in terms of how do you know, do we want to promote that? Yes, because I think in some ways it actually provides a lot of focus from them on specific things that we're trying to solve for the future from a research and other perspective. So that collaboration with them really helps. But, you know, again, you know, like Karl was saying, it's very tough to just kind of say, you know, how is this going to look like in the future? Is there going to be enough talent out there to continue the journey for so many more students, like how we started, right? Yeah, that's concerning.
Yeah, the walled garden, that analogy or description is very, very nice. But one of the my observations from actually being a consumer of some of these walled garden initiatives, I mean, lately what I've seen is, yes, you know, the Jan LeCuns and Jeffrey Hintons of the world are still, their students are pretty much Google scholars, or they're part of some Apple program or whatnot, right? Different companies are hiring them. But here's the good news. They're not going inside and just disappearing into a black hole. There are fantastic articles and you know, really mathematically sound proofs that these guys are publishing as part of their work, right? So the spirit of what Travis is very familiar with, open source, giving back to the community, is one of the things that these people are entering into that commercial relationship with. The money is great, right? But at the same time, they're also looking at, you know, what can we give back? And those contracts that they're having, it's not just a walled garden, but there is that little give back to society that comes out of many of these things. I mean, Google's contribution to Hadoop was one of the, it kicked us off in the right direction, I would imagine, right? So it's partly, it's a sort of a tug of war, good tension between the two.
Yeah, Do you mind if I comment on the open source part of that? I think that's a really good concept, actually, because the same phenomenon has actually been happening in open source for years. Like the NumPy community call it corporate capture of developers, right? It's kind of when I went and worked for a consulting company, I stopped contributing as much on the NumPy list. I tried, but it's not just me, it's others as well. So this is a phenomenon we've been well aware of, and it's kind of been amplified recently. Like, and right now, the whole PyData ecosystem, NumPy ecosystem, is talking about the single agenda open source projects, right? As opposed to multiple agenda open source projects. So we have these corporate capture, but I think one thing that's happening is they're giving back a lot, right? And so I think, in some sense, the open source movement has really helped us to get people aware, and companies are always full of good intentioned people. Like a lot of times we create these caricatures that don't exist. Like they're just incentive alignment and understanding the flows that are happening. But that movement of open source has done exactly that. People have decided themselves, hey, I need to be able to contribute back to open source, and that's part of their contract. And they can get those kind of, with that demand, they can get those kind of results. Jupyter Lab. So Brian Granger, a really good dear friend of mine, we've been collaborating on Jupyter Lab for 4 years. He just recently was hired by Amazon, right? He's working at AWS now, right? So here's another person captured by the board, right? Is one way to look at it. But, I talked to him about that. I said, look, how are you? His view is he's getting effectively to help Amazon treat open source better. Like Amazon's got the worst reputation right now for just taking from open source, and I think they deserve it. But I don't think they've intentionally done that. I think they can learn to how to give back appropriately, and I'm very hopeful about that.
And we do see some academics kind of come back into Fei Li, who was in part of Google AI, is back at Stanford, kind of bringing back that knowledge. Another thing beyond open source is some of the data sets. I think that's also great that some of the large corporations have the resources to, if you've heard like the ImageNet database, for example, just the amount of innovation that happened by simply having all these images, it's kind of led to that revolution we've had with CNNs and now with like the Word databases and BERT, if you've heard of that, sort of the word embeddings that now people can create models based on pre-trained models that are amazing, that are world-class. So I think, the bottom line we talked about is there continues to need to be a give back, and I think that, I think all the companies here are really fond of giving, whether it's open source or data sets, and ensuring that everybody's benefiting from this.
Yeah, great questions and follow-up discussion. So we are running kind of short of time, maybe, but I'll try to address the questions as well. So getting back to our real world, like software and what is needed, I got some stuff from Quansight lab. I guess maybe Travis, you can give a somewhat insight, like what are the things out there.
Yeah, ran out of time.
Yeah, so.
We were saying too much about the corporate evil program. I think we should have restreamed.
So.
Yeah, hold on, we're recording it, so go ahead. I'm just gonna dial back in for 1 second.
Yeah, so I guess maybe Travis, you can highlight us. If someone wants to understand what are the software stack, and also in terms of cloud AI, that's been the talk of the recently, like a service and.
Yeah, I think the cloud, we've got folks who can speak to the cloud service here. I'll talk about the software stack. It's been a passion of mine for 20 years. It's complicated right now, right? That's the best thing I can say. There's a lot of people. Obviously, TensorFlow has become really super popular, and it's kind of creating its own silo of activity. One of the challenges is how do we reintegrate that with this other activity that's been going on for 20 years? Or do we just recreate it? Or is that going to be the result? And there's enough energy there that maybe that is the result. So what's happening is people aren't sure. Okay, if I've been building my stack over here on the matplotlib, numpy, scipy, scikit-learn, is that, and TensorFlow can be used in an augmented way, but many people come, they don't even know about the other. They just come to the TensorFlow story and they start there. At least we have Python as a common ground, right? And we can sort of at least start to help people understand a common way to talk about function composition. I think the software stack is still emerging, unfortunately. I mean, I wish I didn't have to say that 20 years from now. But there's a lot of really good stuff, but try to stay high level. If you start to build big systems and you think we're settled, you're gonna have to refactor those big systems. I guarantee you, what you build today, a big system you build today, you're gonna have to refactor it within 5 years, because we're just not there. It's still too bubbly. But as a user, you can build scripts that do a lot of good work, and that'll work for a long time. So as a user, you're really in good shape to experiment, to build models. As you start to think about deploying your solution, I think there's an opportunity for discussion about how you would approach that. You know, if you're Google, you just write wherever you want, build your own stuff, right? But if you're not that big, what do you do? That's a good question. I think, and I'd love to talk with anybody about that more in depth if you'd like. That's what we do at Quansight.
So, I mean, the way I would answer this is, I think that's exactly what we see our developers in the team also struggle with as they build out solutions and models, is, how do you go about, building a full stack solution? I think, I always believe that, to have AI, you need IA, which is information architecture. That's the fundamental for anything. And I've seen a lot of companies, a lot of people try to start going and dabbling in AI and starting to build their models without a solid foundation. It's like almost trying to build your house right off, whatever, without a proper foundation. So my thinking is, before you get too deep into these, the first thing is, do you have a proper information architecture design? And it doesn't have to be like something where I'm going to have everything right out of the gate, right? It's an AI ladder. That's the way I see it. Is right from step one, there is actually a process that you go through to determine what is the actual solution and the problem you're solving for, and then start, along that path. I also want to talk about, that's one of the reasons why, I don't know if we were at IBM Think, our 2019 conference. It's our flagship conference about data, AI, analytics. And one of the things that we've done is we have our, an analytics organization, and we had AI. And as a matter of fact, just recently, we actually brought data and AI together under one organization. Exactly for this purpose, because data, as we know, is the most expensive commodity out in the market today. I think we all totally agree. And for you to have a strong AI, you need to have and understand a good architecture and also your overall data structured in the sense, what is your path for your data? So I think a lot of those things need to be considered when you think about what's in the back, about how you utilize that, because all of that will fit into your overall end-to-end architecture.
I agree with Travis in that I think Python is kind of just that sort of foundation. I mean, R is of course used as well in industry and academia, but I'd say kind of on that foundation, you learn some of the libraries that are kind of on here. But I don't think that individual choice of libraries is that important. I think that, a lot of the cloud providers, we're talking about cloud AI a little bit, make available a lot of managed services so you don't have to do everything yourself. It used to be setting up a Hadoop cluster was a real pain, and now it's a couple of clicks and a nice simple GUI and you're off to the races. So some of that ML infrastructure is taken care of for you. And then there are APIs. There are Google happens to have an offering for auto ML, right? So you can kind of create custom models without having to kind of get into a Jupyter notebook and write it yourself. And then sometimes you might need to write a custom model, but it all depends on the problem you're trying to solve. So I just kind of taking sort of the Python ladder concept. There's a lot that can be done without, being super specialized in one specific framework. If you know the concepts, you have that sort of Python foundation, you have some cloud capabilities if you're able to leverage kind of build on what's already out there.
So yeah, the rest of y'all have covered core AI stack quite thoroughly, so I'll touch that, right? But if you consider again that the model you're building is just, I think it was a Google paper that showed that the machine learning and the modeling part of it is just probably like 10% of the overall problem, right? There's the whole information architecture, but more interesting, so what is the software stack in that surrounding architecture? Let's think through that, right? So data, again, let's go back to some common denominators, right? Devices are streaming data at you, right? So now, what does it take to transport that stream? Stream basically the sound wave, which is being captured here and is being transmitted to one of the receivers somewhere here and so on, right? So that, at the speed of that transmission, you're expected to actually aggregate, say, 3 seconds of some sound bite and then take some action on it, right? So there is a whole pipeline of streaming the data, of aggregating the data. So the technologies, open source technologies again, like Kafka, are playing a big role in this. You start pushing the data into some storage format. So you now have object stores. Instead of trying to store everything as tables and columns, you have object stores that are basically storing things in clusters. So S3 is now becoming a fairly big standard for storage, an important component for storage. You get into the other layers of this. So you got visualization, right? At some point, you got to interact with that system, right? And so there's a whole bunch of JS, Node.js, React. There are lots of these frameworks and solution sets that are out there that go into making these solutions. Now, the other part, we touched on cloud AI a little bit, which is the big cloud vendors are providing actually a space for you to go and run your model in or create new models in and so on, right? But what goes into that is there's a whole slew of a new movement, I think it's about 4 years old now, microservices-based architectures, right? So scaling, because what does it take to deploy Alexa for one room versus 200 million homes, right? Scaling of that will automatically clobber. I mean, you won't be able to run it on a small 2 or 3 node cluster anymore. In fact, you don't even know what the demand is going to be, right? So you want to figure out a way to scale, on a sort of a flexible basis. So there's a whole stack of software that's coming around to support these microservices, Docker, and you containerize your entire application and then deploy that into some sort of a Kubernetes cluster, right? Which will do the entire orchestration of the solution. So think of AI, when you think of, you guys are thinking of a model, but the solution, when you look at the overall solution, you've got to wrap around this with all these other software that is becoming much more important in today's solution set.
So I think we can take one or two questions from the audience. The back.
Yes, the information architecture, can you give us some short description or the checkpoint that what is the minimum requirement or what a question I should ask my company that I'm ready to adopt AI?
So, yeah, definitely, good question actually. There is a few things, I think, as if your company is thinking about going on an AI journey. One of the questions that we typically get, and I'll share some of these that clients have asked us, is how large a data set do I need before I even start considering AI? What is really worth? They ask us questions about, do I need to go and rebuild and start everything and start building all the models from scratch? Or what are some of the already available vetted models that I can go and adopt and figure out if that's something that will work for my use case? From an information architecture perspective, I think where I see a lot of clients coming in with, we don't know where to start, we don't know what to do, is around not being able to have their data in one place. So they come to us with, I have data sitting on multiple public cloud environments, I have some data sitting on-prem, I have data sitting on private cloud. I have data sitting in a hybrid. And now you please tell us, how am I supposed to build, an AI solution on top and then derive cognitive insights and then go to market as fast as possible? So that becomes an almost extremely challenging and complex thing to solve, right? When your environment is spread across so many environments, your data. So that's one of the reasons why we announced the ability for, it doesn't matter where your data is anymore. Before we would tell these clients, well, let's start with your data, let's figure out where it is, let's try to bring it under one place, and then we'll start building a model on it. And that really wasn't the way to go about solving the problem, because we know that moving data around costs a lot of money to our clients. And it takes time, it takes down systems, it has a continuum impact on clients. So the change that we've made is basically being able to say, you keep your data where it is, and we'll bring the AI to you. So that was the most recent launch that we did last week, I think, where our CEO announced that it's AI anywhere. So it doesn't matter where your data is anymore, on what cloud environments it is. So those are some of the things that are actually available as capabilities. And it's really about understanding that complete business problem, really, it boils down to that, is understanding what is the problem that you're trying to solve, what is the outcome you're driving towards, and having an information architecture and breaking it down in each of the ladders like I was describing earlier. Because infusing AI should be almost the last step of your ladder. It's not where you begin your process. And that's where I think it's reversed when we see some people starting right there. And then later figuring out what was I trying to solve. And I think it's the reverse.
Did you have a question? Scott?
This is on the career point. Before, the job titles used to be like data analyst, data scientist. Now, new titles, something like data science engineer, machine learning engineer. These kind of new titles are popping up. I just want to know who's inventing it and why are they doing it?
Good question. So we've seen some resumes with those titles and internships in that role capacity. So, but I think here is where I've seen, when I talk to data scientists, and this is honest opinion, so Lalitha opinion, right? When you see data scientists and I ask them, can you speak a little bit more about what kind of real projects you worked on? And obviously these are early professional hires that I'm talking about. I think, they give a pretty good detailed view of a limited data set, obviously, right? Limited environment infrastructure that they've used to practice. And then, you have to get to some level of depth based on the reason why you are interested in that person. Because, again, there seems to be a view that if you work with data, it's data engineering. If you do integration of data, you're a data integration engineer. And I've learned all this in the last few years, where I'm like, okay, tell me exactly what you do. I integrate data across two systems. So I'm a data integration engineer. So you're not a data engineer. Like, well, I do work with data, so data/integration, whatever. But I think when it comes to data scientists, one of the things that I've done is I try to separate it out from an application data scientist to a data modeler, or someone that actually does build out these models, that predictive models or whatever models that we're building, machine learning models and deep learning models. And then there is also a research vision to this. There's a research component to this where they're trying to figure out, this human intelligence, voice recognition, and things that we do in Watson, which is about debating like a human being. How can you mimic me and talk like me and take a stand on a topic and be able to argue for or against with me? So that's a different level of data science. And then there is the actual practical application data scientist, and then there is the modeling data scientist. So that's the reason why, how did those job roles come up? I don't know, but somebody really said, we gotta separate these so that we know, like I said, putting Java down, and then you really have to ask a few questions before you know what level of Java, right? What kind. So it's the same thing I feel with data science. I don't know. Come on.
I'll talk. I'll take a chance to talk short. So I'll give an example. I'm going on site to a customer to do a technical assessment. And I've divided the 3 days into 6 conversations. And I think those conversations need different roles, need different people to talk to. I think that's why data science has been this monolithic layer to talk about a lot of different things. And there are different things we're going to do. We're going to talk about their data layer. And maybe a data engineer, a data integration engineer might be more appropriate for that. But also the database administrator. There's roles that have already been defined that are still relevant to that conversation. Then we're going to talk about models. All right, let's look at your models. And that is more, okay, who's your modeling people more mathematically inclined. They're kind of probably for scientists to begin with. They can write scientific-based code, but then they can't really write code that's production quality because they don't know all the things that's necessary for that. So that's a different kind of a role. Something that's really good there. And we're going to talk about the cloud infrastructure and how you put this to production. And that's people that geek out about Kubernetes versus Salt, right? We talk about Kubernetes, but there's things before there that were already doing some of this stuff that have kind of been forgotten about, but not actually in practice are still used. So people that think about the infrastructure and cloud orchestration, more DevOps. And we're going to talk about visualization. Like that's a whole other thing. There's a group of people trying to create dashboards and visualizing, visualization. That's another. So the reason it's separated out is we can have conversations with people who are specialized in these areas. And that's where these roles start coming up, is there are people specialized in these different kind of phenomena. Back to your information architecture question, I think the question I would have them ask is, can we visualize our data? Can I build a plot about what I'm interested in? If I can't do that, then I'm really far away from trying to be able to do some modeling around it. Like if I can quickly build a plot, that's easy. All of us can think through that. There's a lot of methods to do that. Python's full of packages for plotting. That's a really good starting point, right? Let's plot my data.
How about on the deployment side? The same question, but on the deployment side.
On the deployment, am I ready for deployment?
How do we know that I'm ready?
How do we know what? Oh, I'm ready for deployment?
Yeah.
Probably including it already.
Before I adopt AI, right?
So I think most people, they're stuck, a lot of enterprises are stuck in the transition because we're talking Kubernetes, we're talking Salt. Most people are still using VMware and, hand-rolled machines that they've stuck on people's desks. I mean, we talk on these big words, but you go out and practice, people are stuck on stuff that they adopted 10 years ago, hoping for the Shangri-La, and now they're having to retool. So I think part of the reason, the recognition is a continuous integration conversation. It's not about we're going to finish our process. So I like the word AI journey. I like the word we're on a technology journey. We have to understand our investment and keep abreast of that investment. Do we know how we're putting things to production? Is this just a fire and forget, or do I have is there someone who's actually responsible for that? That's a lot of people, their biggest challenge is actually processes inside their organization. It's not just hiring somebody and you're done, it's like, got a problem.
Well, it's the legalities, you did it earlier, where the insurance and the zip codes, there's a whole lot of things in a lot of industries where you can come to conclusions, but
I can't do it. I got compliance. I got to check with my compliance officer if I can do this, and that's true, right?
So just to add to your thing about, because we go through the same thing, I have a data science engineering tribe, and one of the things that we constantly go through when we look at acceptance criteria before we promote a model to production on every project that we do is we go all the way to, and then we're like, well, what's the scoring like? Well, what's the percentage? So I think, setting some clear KPIs on what level of percentage or scoring is acceptable to your business or whatever, you're going to promote, and going through like continuous integration, continuous testing. So you need to have a very solid end-to-end automated, hopefully automated testing, so that you're able to have some level of confidence before you promote this and make it into production. But I hear you. This is something that's been, when we start out an AI project in the team, it's super exciting, right? It's so excited about going and building this, and then when we see it prototyped in our end of iteration reviews and showcase demos and stuff, it's amazing to see it. But the question that I ask is, okay, so when can you actually put this in so that we can actually say, this is live, okay, this is an action. That's when, everybody kind of goes into a fire drill, right? It's like, oh wow, so we gotta actually go and put it in production and deploy it? It's like, well, yeah, what the heck were we doing all this time, right? So it's all about finally getting and realizing value from all of that engineering work we've done. So, it's again, we should talk offline too, because, there are people here from the teams, from my team there, who actually go through this with several of our projects, data science projects, and compare notes on how, I would love to hear how, some of you do.
I'm probably gonna say what she said, a slightly different way, it's just good software engineering principles.
Yeah.
If you're, data science is a key part of your business process, you're making predictions, you can't go down, you have to, is it tested, you have continuous integration, have you thought about high availability, is it gonna scale? None of those change, that's just, again, good software engineering. So if you have the infrastructure to support all that, then you're in a good position. If you're not ready for that, you're still really in the prototyping phase. And then back to what Travis said, you're really not ready to even model it. If you can't plot it, then you don't have the data that kind of tells you if you're ready to start.
So I'm trying to bring the focus back to your question, right? You talked about what I call as a, role salad, right? You have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and soon it looks like something tasty to eat, right? So basically, this, you got to go think back about how many of you guys actually have a degree in something called software engineering? Raise your hand. Software engineering, remember, not computer science. Not computer science, or computer engineering. I'm talking about software engineering. One, right? Now, think hard. Nobody actually is trained to be a software engineer. It's one of the occupational, side effects of the workplace. Okay, that terminology happens to come from the first place when they started doing software projects. They started, you look at every damn software project workbook, right? It looks like a bloody construction project. The whole mechanics of assembling a team, assigning roles, all of that stuff was inherited from the construction industry, for crying out loud. So the construction industry has a project engineer. Is that a guy an engineer or a project manager? Nobody knows, right? So that confusion sort of comes into our world. So who's exactly a software engineer? Now, so the side corollary to all that. If you are observing or participating in an organization that believes in well-defined roles and keeping you in that role, I suggest run. Okay? Because that's the end of your career, right? So what you got to look at is that role is a temporary holding place for getting things done for that moment, right? Your role in that particular project is to fulfill this task that she was doing, the various tasks that they were talking about. If that is the modus operandi, you actually have a successful organization ahead of you. So don't fixate on the terminology, specialize in something and be good at it, and create a name for yourself in that, and that's how you'll start attracting work towards you in that sense.
Cool, interesting discussion. So now I wanted to kind of bring it back to another topic that I am personally very passionate about, which is AI for social good. Each company is starting different initiative. IBM has XPRIZE, Google AI for Art from Microsoft, and just in a very, very small scope, we're trying AI for Greater Good, which is a non-profit. We're running through this thing out, but very small scope. But on that note, in a bigger scope, what do you think in terms of company, business leaders, a strategy that would, you have to keep your competitive advantage to yourself in terms of your country or business in the US space, but also what do you think, how do you reach out and actually also contribute to the society while keeping that advantage? I want to your thought in terms of those kind of two, or maybe say.
I'm picking up only because I have the microphone. Yeah. So it's an interesting question. So for when you consider this term social good. It's actually a more recent phenomenon. It's called corporate social responsibility for the most part, right? And there are whole divisions set up for corporate social responsibility. And in many of these cases, the so-called doing big data or data science for social good is managed and funded by those organizations, sub-organizations within these companies. So what is happening is, it is a projection of ensuring that people understand that we are following some principles that are either giving back to society or doing something good for society while we make money off of everything else, and so on, right? That's part of the phenomenon, right? And inside of that, from the financial services business, so how we end up using this kind of or fitting into this doing corporate social good. There are a lot of exchange traded funds that are basically set up on the principle of fair trade. So there'll be a coffee exchange traded fund which basically focuses on gathering all equity, all stock, that's basically where the company behind that equity is practicing fair trade. So in the financial industry, there's this whole notion of actually trying to invest in groups of companies that have committed to this corporate social responsibility. And so that's one of the strategies that we are adopting to be participants in that, because we ourselves can set up a data science team and say, hey, we're going to solve some big poverty problems somewhere in the world, but that's ending world poverty is holy grail of all of us, maybe, right? But that's one of the things that we can do. But rather than that, in our day-to-day work, some of the things that we are doing to incorporate corporate social responsibility is what I just explained.
So we touched on a little bit before with the AI ethics question, and I think that really comes down to responsible AI. The term's used quite a bit. I think it is super important. On a more local level, like on my team, I think a key principle is empathy for our users, really understanding what their needs are, what they're going through. An interesting example of there's one of our team members is in Tokyo, and he was working with a local farmer who basically was somebody in his farm was spending 8 hours a day sorting cucumbers, basically looking at the size and texture, doing this by hand multiple hours every day, and some of the sorting technology wasn't available to the small scale farmers. And so he had an engineering background actually, but kind of picked up building his own model that could basically classify these cucumbers by different quality levels and fetch different prices at the market, and really made available to him technology that only the large farming enterprises had. And there's a whole blog post about it. It's a fantastic story about using AI for good, allowing this farmer to really focus on what he enjoys best, growing delicious vegetables, not on sorting cucumbers all day long. So this is just a small example of the kind of things that, when we harness AI correctly, we can really change people's lives, make jobs better, make things more convenient.
So I would say that, just 5-10 years ago, most of our sellers would go and talk to the CIO, the CTO, the CMO, whatever, abbreviation, right? And about deals, right? About, hey, we have this product, we have this, right? And try to talk to them about it. And that would be the channel, right? How they work down the talk. And, that person would pretty much say, no, we just, we use this product, this is what we're interested in, this is what we should do in my development shop, this is what my engineering team does. And the seller would go and speak to the developers in the team, and they'd be like, what? Heck no, we use open source, we do this, we do that, right? So there was a complete disconnect between what the business leaders, technical leaders, or whoever was signing the check was assuming is needed for their development environment and infrastructure versus what the developers were actually doing. The point here is that we picked up, meaning IBM, very quickly, that the real power, the buying power, is no longer with the C-level suite. The signing could be, I agree, but from a buying decision and making that and enabling that is in the hands of a lot of us as a developer. And as we caught on to that, we realized that the key person in the room who can actually make that and support that decision and make that happen is that developer in the room. So we launched, from a social cost perspective, we have a very broad developer advocacy and ecosystem organization. And one of the examples, two examples I'll give you. One is a program that we launched last year called IBM Call for Code. And you guys should Google that and see. President Clinton actually was at the award ceremony giving away the awards to the people that won. And this was an effort in really basically opening up IBM Cloud to any person in the world and saying, we challenge you, pick a social cause that is calling your passion, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it is, a hurricane impact somewhere. Pick a passion that you're passionate about and collaborate with people that you want to, and let's see what you produce. And we opened up everything from our cloud infrastructure to everything from services. And you would be amazed at how many developers actually reacted to that and participated in that program. So I would definitely ask you to go check it out because it had phenomenal success, which underscores multiple times the point I was making, that these are the people that are actually having and enforcing and making sure that the buying decisions are going in the direction they want. So that's to speak to kind of the open source angle, right? All of us together are smarter than one of us. I think that's the core principle of open source, and as Travis would say. So I think it's really about bringing people and getting them to contribute in communities, being active in open source, and things like that, which actually ties into a broader social cause, right? At the end of the day, it's a lot of them contributing their ideas and time. And the other example I'll give you about social cause is a program called Digital Nation Africa. There are countries out there that are not as, they don't have the opportunities to educate themselves on skills, and continents where they just don't have that opportunity. So launching programs like Digital Nation Africa was something that IBM did last year in fourth quarter, which was about providing free skill sets on AI, data science, and in general in analytics and data to these people for free, so that if you are an aspiring to be an engineer or a developer, you should not fall behind just because you don't know where to start. So we have meetups like this over in other continents, and they have opportunities to go and grab these skill sets so that they can actually become ready for the kind of jobs that's going to open in some of those countries in the future. So those are some examples of social causes and impact where I think each of us can have a role to play there.
Great, I appreciate. I believe companies themselves. The reason I love entrepreneurship is I believe companies themselves do good. Like by enabling people to solve their economic needs, they rise up a level in their hierarchy of needs. So I really believe in markets and entrepreneurship because of that. In fact, I see open source communities as exactly part of that market phenomenon. Now we have some real problems in this today. We have problems where there are a lot of participants, and we have sort of concentration that's happening because of various phenomena that's happening that we have to look at. I also recognize there are externalities that happen when companies get together and they solve their issues. If rights aren't determined in the right way, then externalities show up and people get hurt, right? And so AI does present a number of fronts, a number of ways to kind of counterbalance that. One is the democratization of data. I really admire that companies are making their tools available. We can have another conversation about the problem of TensorFlow, but I'm really excited by the reality of TensorFlow, the existence of TensorFlow, the fact that it's making it possible for people to do this easily. I think leveling that information flow, like having people see that, is just leveling up skills. It'll increase transparency. That said, we do have some problems. We have problems where there are a lot of people out there putting work in open source and they're not getting any of the benefit from it. Like the people who are benefiting from open source are the people who package that and produce a product. And we have not come up with systems to actually make sure some of that comes back to the people actually producing the open source. We need to fix that. I think we can. I think there's some real things we need to fix that. And as an entrepreneur, I've got ideas about how we're going to push in this direction over the next year or two. I think other things that are real is data. There are a lot of, right now, there's a lot of data that you're going to be generating. Where is that going? And who's going to be making decisions around that? And why shouldn't you have a place and a piece of that information flow. I think there's a lot of opportunity and need for those kinds of reassessing of the conversation. The internet's a phenomenal thing, but it's interesting how the very reason for the internet was to create a distributed phenomenon, like distributed decision-making, distributed ability, and yet here we are in 2019, 18, moving to 20. All of a sudden, it's kind of single big corporate companies that are kind of defining our data. It's like back to the mainframe. And there are reasons for that, but I'm really excited by the technology movements that are still trying to distribute data. How do we distribute data, distribute compute, while still providing value to folks? And I think AI is really part of the more social program of helping, as we use these technologies, and I think it's really connected to Code for Good, Code for Society, these movements have happened before. As we benefit from these, how do we stay connected to our humanity and the desire to really lift everything, that everybody does get lifted, and it's not just theoretically lifted, but we actually find out where it's not working, and then how do we solve those problems and fix it? So, and it's gonna take a lot of people. Like, it's not gonna be done by one big law passed, it's not gonna be done by one big phenomenal leader. It's gonna be done by a million independent people making daily decisions and doing small things that have a big impact.
Great, we're kind of running short on time, so I have a couple of other topics, but I'll maybe combine them and get you to answer one or both of them kind of. So I have two topics. One is the AI research. These are the slides from IBM Artificial Research Lab. There are a number of fields that are being studied and there are papers going on. But I want to maybe touch generally in terms of which research area you see impacting your immediate area of work or what you see is useful. And another topic I had was the AI future, which I think kind of touched both like yin yang, it can destroy the world versus it will do the whole good. So yeah, just two of those topics, maybe whichever you want to touch there.
I'll just go first. I don't have a ton to say on this topic, although I'm really excited by the AI research. I actually think most people, when they're thinking about the AI skills gap, they're actually just thinking about the research problem. Like, because that does require a bit of expertise that is not easily accessible, but we don't need everybody doing that. And I'm really excited about the recurrent networks. I'm actually excited by what the practical application of AI will teach us about the way we work. Because one of the reasons I think reasoning is so far in the future is we don't know what reasoning is. Like, you and I both know what it is, we experience it every day, but there's no model for it. Like, what are we doing actually when we're reasoning? We're kind of making predictions about ourselves, about the world around us. Like, you try to study the physics, the cognitive theory, the cognitive sciences, and it's still nascent. So, to imagine that we're gonna have computers do this when we don't even know what we're doing is pretty far-fetched. But I think some of these reinforcement learning experiments, where we're starting to connect reasoning, learning systems together, which our brain is, a learning system connected together, with lots of learning systems interconnecting and a learning system on top of that, that's exciting to me, because I think that research is going to actually lead us to a better understanding of who we are. And I hope that leads to a better treatment of who we are, and a better society, and a better culture that emerges, by really knowing who we are as human beings.
So I'll touch on a couple things. I think, obviously speech recognition is a key area of research where IBM is focused on. There is, there is facial recognition, which is never going to be enough. And there is always use cases that come from several areas of the industry, from defense to other areas of the industry, where there's a constant need for better facial recognition for several use cases that they have. The one about reasoning, I think, is a very key one, and I would definitely ask you guys to go, look up IBM Project Debater. It's one of the first time where we've taught a machine to, and I think I alluded to this earlier, and there should be a YouTube video too, you should go check it out. I played it at one of the conferences where I spoke, and it really shows how a machine has been taught to take a stand on a topic like genetic engineering. That was the topic that they were debating. And Watson was actually debating with one of a very well-renowned debater, working in Israel. And she was invited to come and they were debating. And the fact that it was able to apply, to argue with somebody, you really need to understand a lot of the cues, right? And then take an opinion and say, I disagree with you because of this. And it's a beautiful conversation. You guys should watch that. That's one of the groundbreaking research that's come out in the area of teaching a machine to reason with you, which is what you were saying. We're still much far away from actually having, but that's a first step towards actually making a machine stand up and say, I don't agree with you. And that's fuzzy, right? We've always talked about fuzzy logic, but this is a big step there. The other areas that I think we are working on is obviously bias, right? And where it exists, where it doesn't, how do you detect that? There's several areas around quantum and how we bring in AI into that. So again, from a research standpoint, there's several places there, and if you're interested specifically in knowing about these, you can always go to ibm.com/research, and we usually have publications and papers that have been publicly shared, conferences on what's the latest that our research labs are working on across the world. So you will definitely be able to see some of the great projects there.
I think really all of the above is really interesting. Personally, I guess I'm fascinated by generative models, this concept of basically instead of detecting from existing data, creating things, and you've probably seen some of the examples with cat and dog images and things of that nature. But once we start to move into summarizing a document, or just all the different possibilities that we can create, I think it's just going to be mind-blowing. About the future of AI, I think, that the kind of discussions that we've had today is a perfect example why I'm optimistic about it. There's a lot of, questions, dialogue, a great open discussion as we're all evolving together in this. So it's not happening behind closed doors. It's just a lot of, everyone in the world participating and asking great questions. So that bodes well for the future.
Thank you. I guess this will be the last question for the evening, so let me quickly conclude. I don't want to keep between you and you. So best thing is for us, we're noticing we're trying to solve business problems in the financial world, right? And since our main focus has been on the area of operational improvements, there's one interesting problem we're still struggling with. Not just us, but the rest of the enterprises around the world. Almost all business data comes out in the form of some, written text, right? Just structured, supposedly, spewed onto some pages, printed, scanned, sent around, and then you're supposed to make sense out of all of it, right? So the original, this whole, if you were to trace the whole chain, and maybe if you had the original source where the document was created, we could probably, we don't need to extract that content, right? These are simple problems that some of you guys have solved about 20,000 times before. Yet, businesses are still struggling with this problem, right? Which basically boils down to getting NLP done right and building a massive toolkit of NLP techniques, because not any one technique is not working, honestly. So that's one of the fundamental areas of research that we focus on to ensure that we can provide an enterprise-wide set of content that preserves the original intent of the author that produced that content.
Cool. I think we have run out of time a little bit. Thank you, but it was a great discussion, and thanks for the time and the entertaining discussion. And also thank you for coming over here, spending 2 or more hours, 2 hours here with us. And hopefully we'll see you in the next meetup. And if you want any more specific information, I think they can reach you in somewhere you can post in the meetup and I will try to coordinate with them. And with that, conclude it today, and thanks for IBM hosting it, and thank you, everyone.
But you know what? He now came back.